Today's guest is a true pioneer at the intersection of science, wellness, and storytelling. Len May, MSc, is a global authority in personalized medicine and the CEO and co-founder of EndoDNA, a company revolutionizing health through DNA-based technology. With over 25 years of experience, Len has helped decode the human genome to create customized wellness solutions, backed by the world's largest real-world efficacy database. But Len isn't just a scientist. He's a connector, a creative, and a cultural storyteller. As the host of the podcast, Everything is Personal, he dives deep with visionaries, artists, and entrepreneurs, bringing science and soul together in every conversation. Whether it's decoding your DNA or celebrating the legacy of Prince, Len brings passion, precision, and heart to everything he does. Please welcome Len May, a trailblazer in health innovation and human connection. Hey, how's it going, man?
What's up, man? That was a great intro. I need to borrow that. I'll just play it every single time I get on any calls or anything like that. There you
go. There you go, man. See, I'm already helping.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's give everybody a little bit of background, man. How did you get into the DNA world?
Man, it's a pretty long story, but I'll start with childhood to kind of frame it.
Okay.
So I'm an immigrant. I came here when I was 6 years old. I was born in Lithuania, and for learning language and all that stuff. But after that, I was sitting in class, and teachers would call on me. And I'd be sort of spaced out. I'd be in my head thinking about other things, and it kept going on, or like underachiever, this and that. Anyway, my parents took me to doctors. I got diagnosed with ADD, and they tried to put me on medication, Ritalin or whatever medication was at that time. And I can't say that it didn't work. It depends how you define work. Like it helped me to focus, but it removed my sense of an emotional connection to myself. So you just kind of go coast through the world, but there's no happy, no sad, none of that kind of stuff. So I was going to school, and there's some older kids I was hanging out with, and they asked me if I want to smoke a cigarette. I was like, yeah, man, I'll be cool with the cool kids. I'll smoke a cigarette. Never questioned why they had one, but there's one cigarette that passed around. It got to me. I took a drag. I was dabbling in cigarettes at that time anyway. I'm like, that doesn't taste like a cigarette. Did it again, and they're laughing. Like, what? They put cannabis in the cigarette. So I went back to class, and the windows that are usually open in my head narrowed. I could focus. So I never said anything to anybody, but cannabis became my go-to medicine. And at some point when I was about 17, 18, between that, my parents would catch me, and they ended up calling the cops and trying to have me arrested and kicking me out of the house. The irony of this thing is that my parents both take formulations my company has patents on now for their conditions, but at that time it was interesting. So I went through like corporate and I got a job at Tower Records, which is an old record store. People who are much younger don't know what that is, but it's a place they used to sell records. Some behind me. So I got into the music kind of world. And music, cannabis, and I got fascinated by that and really took a deep dive into the science. And then who was my girlfriend now, my ex-wife, at the time, said you have to get a real job. So I went to work for like Price Waterhouse and PwC, and then worked for a venture capital company. Loved that. Became a commercial real estate broker. She was an actress at the time, so we kept going back and forth. I lived in Philly. And she kept going back and forth from LA. And then she said, if I really want to do this, we have to move here. So long story, a little bit longer, moved to LA, not a reciprocal state. I had my whole business in Pennsylvania, and decided, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And these guys walked in to the real estate office, and they wanted to open an alternative pharmacy. So they're like, what is that? I got talking to them. They wanted to open up a dispensary. So I asked them for their paperwork, didn't have anything. I helped them. They offered me a partnership. So I was a partner in a dispensary called Kush Kingdom. And we ended up opening five altogether under the same brand. And then what I would notice was two people consume the same varietal of cannabis and have a completely different experience. So my ADD sort of kicked in again, and I started doing research, and I found a guy who genetically sequenced a plant, went to work with their company and learned genetic sequencing on the plant side. Their parent company was doing what's called pharmacogenomics, which is the study of how drugs affect individual bodies and also drug interaction, drug contraindications. So I got into the human side, and my idea was we have plant material here, we have human genetics here. Let's bring those two together, guide people to an experience. And I launched the company with the first endocannabinoid system genetic test, looking at your genes and how they predict your experience with phytocannabinoids. And we get a patent on the use of DNA to make recommendations associated with the endocannabinoid system. And then from there, we get a machine learning patent and started interrogating the whole genome and providing a platform for healthcare professionals to use so they can have a more personalized experience with their patients. So male hormone health, female hormone health, nutrigenomics, skin, anything that has to do with your genome so you can have that personal experience.
Yeah. A lot of people, even I did, I mistaken what this is. I thought my psychiatrist, when I went and they drew my blood before I even seen him, they drew my blood and ran a bunch of tests and he told me all my hormone levels and all that stuff. And that's what I thought was like matching you up via DNA. And I learned later that's not the case. And it does make sense, that you can take and study somebody's DNA and determine, who's got the potential risk for such diseases, what medicines will work, which ones won't work. That makes sense that it would do that. The hard part is how do you, it couldn't have been easy to start this business.
I mean, the ADD, I think, helped a little bit because when you have that, it's really a superpower. So people that tell you you have a disorder, you need to question that, because when you're led to believe that something is wrong with you, you start to, buy into that.
Yeah.
I believe that having ADD is a superpower if you know how to use it correctly, which allows me to multitask and allows me to hyper focus effectively as well. So one of the things that I think in my research that allowed me to hyper focus, because I was getting dopamine hits from that. Mm-hmm. And the thing about DNA that people should know, 99.9% of us are identical. It's really that 0.1% that makes a difference. And the other thing about DNA, if you think about when you're born, imagine like a circuit breaker box with a bunch of on-off switches, a big one. So think about 20, 25% of those switches that are turned on when we're born and like in the first few months. So like things like our eye color, hair color, skin color, the rest of your genetic predisposition, so your encoding, gets to be turned on or off based on lifestyle. And what I mean by that is the food that we consume, the nutrients that we consume, the exposure to things like heavy metals, pesticides, all these other things, and our own neurochemistry, so stress hormones, etc., they can actually trigger the expression, which is called epigenetics, the expression of genetic predispositions. So if you know your life's GPS, you know your genome, and you understand where your own potholes are in your own road, you will take action with your lifestyle to be able to avoid those. So like how you can, an analogy is I can drive from LA to Philly without a GPS. I'm going to hit some traffic jams. I'm going to take wrong turns. I'm going to get lost, all those different things. But I'm going to get there eventually. But at what cost? Now, if I have my GPS, I know which roads to avoid and which to take more. So that's why DNA is important. But it's only as good as the now so what. Just because you have a genetic predisposition, what do you do with that? And the what do you do with that is you have an intervention. So if it's a healthcare professional that looks at you, and you talked about psychopharmacology. So I have a really interesting story. I have a friend of mine recently, very successful, financially successful guy, had a venture, didn't work well. When I did his genome, I knew he had predispositions to depressive states, to get depressed. And, if you look at him from the outside, like, man, this guy has it all, but he got depressed. went to a psychopharmacologist, got an antidepressant. He's not from LA, but he was in LA and he was with his wife and one of his kids. And he was driving around the canyons. And he said, I had an overwhelming desire to drive off the cliff. He goes, it was so real that I was sweating in panic and I had to pull over. I pulled over, got out of the car, and my wife came out and said, you okay? He goes, I'm not okay, and I should not be driving. Luckily, he realized that about himself. When he went back to the psychopharmacologist, he did a pharmacogenomics test. He realized that the drug that he was prescribed was red and it was the wrong drug for him. The second thing is he also had treatment-resistant depression. So most likely none of these drugs would have worked for him, and he still got the side effects. And the number one side effect of that was suicidal thoughts. So that's why it's really important to be able to know this and have a collaboration with your healthcare professional.
Yeah. Man, if the VA could do something like that, you just think about how much faster we could get help for some of these guys without putting them through test after test after test after test after test to see what works. I guess I know it's not cheap, but the cost savings would probably still happen.
I mean, it's not expensive. Like a direct-to-consumer test that a doctor would sell for somewhere around, $199, $250, some of that. So it's not a big investment. The challenge with the VA, and we've attempted to work many times with the VA. We've done several veteran studies, the Veteran Genome Project, all those kind of things. The challenge is sick care versus healthcare. And, we've established this structure with insurance and the VA where we treat symptoms. So if I were to ask you, Donnie, I have a pain in my elbow. So what's available to me right now? Well, I can give you an injection in your elbow so it stops hurting. I can give you a pill for that so it blocks the pain so you don't feel it. But it doesn't really go into what's causing, what's the root cause. Like, I didn't play tennis, I didn't play golf, I didn't bang it. Why is this happening? Well, could it be that it's something else that's going to my body? Maybe it's cortisol release that is actually triggering an overactive immune response, and I'm feeling the pain in my elbow, but I got to follow it down where the root cause is. That's healthcare. The sick care gives you the pill or the injection. So until we change the mindset of saying, all right, we need to focus on the like what is the root cause of that and follow that down. And part of it is on us. We as consumers, we as patients, and especially in the West, we're pain averse, right? Oh shit, it hurts. I need to stop the pain. Okay, but maybe the pain is a signal that something is going on. Instead of stopping and numbing the pain, maybe you can go and see what the hell is the cause of that.
Yeah. And exactly what you just described makes perfect sense with the VA. A method that would work and a method that would heal would slow down the traffic of people having to come in. And that's just a bad thing, I guess, because I'm thinking thousands of dollars per person to run this test.
No.
They waste that much just in pills that don't work.
It not only don't work, but can cause harm.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a big watcher of TV, but I see you're a football fan. I'm a Eagles, world champion, a football fan here. So, but the only time I really watch TV with commercials is like, doing sports or something like that. And I see all these commercials for medication, and I never used to watch them before. And the medication is for something on your skin. Let's say it's eczema or something like that. Okay. And then it's like all these side effects. You can die from it. You can bleed. You can get I'm like, well, wait a second. I'd rather deal with my skin issue than, risk death. But we're in the cycle of, pharmacology. We are there in the system to provide medication for people to feel better, but not necessarily heal. And, maybe it's controversial, but there's not a good business model to curing or healing anything because you no longer buy those drugs. And they did spend billions of dollars making them. So
yeah, and they also budget in their budgets the cost for their lawsuits, so they already estimate how much they're going to spend in payouts. I don't even get started on the pharmaceutical man. But so let me ask you this: this is something that knowledge is power, and as a person, if I was serious about wanting to be healed versus symptoms treated, is this something that can be done from down to the consumer, or are you guys just work with primarily just doctors' offices and the physicians?
yeah, so a consumer can go on EndoDNA and buy a test, but here's the difference between the consumer version and the version that's used as a decision support platform for a healthcare professional. The difference is that with your healthcare professional, you did your genome. Now so what kind of part comes in? Well, what's a treatment protocol that's specific to the individual? And you get your baseline blood markers. It's a saliva sample. So you have your genome, you have your baseline biomarkers, you even have like your biological age. And now the doctor can provide a treatment plan. And we use AI for that too. But when you have a healthcare professional that has some knowledge and with that information, you're in collaboration. So you have a treatment plan that's specific to you. And now when you come back to the doctor, you can follow up and get additional tests and see how effective that treatment plan is over time. And there are some things that can be more effective, some things can be less, and you can modify that, but you're actually working with your healthcare professional in partnership. Yes, you can do it on your own, but it's missing that element of the lab work that goes with it. So if you can do that as well, and maybe talk to your healthcare professional, absolutely you can do it, and you'll learn a lot. But it's much more comprehensive when you're doing it with your healthcare professional.
Yeah, that makes sense, because I get my results from the doctor, and I don't even understand half.
Right.
So it really doesn't help me because I don't know what's normal, what's not, and that type of information, would help a person get to the right medicine faster. Um, do you see it improving as far as physicians starting to use this more and more, or are they still kind of rejecting it?
Yeah, it's a great question because you have sort of two types of healthcare professionals. And I don't want to pigeonhole because you have a lot of different practice areas like surgeons, etc. But you have functional medical professionals, integrated medical professionals, and you have, regular doctors. So regular doctors usually have an expertise. So, you have a kidney specialist. They're especially in kidneys. They know the medication. They understand what they need to do for their patient because they've been doing it for a long time, and it's sort of a routine thing. Functional medical professionals will use that whole Western Eastern kind of thing to see what is the root cause. So both healthcare professionals really don't understand DNA that well. Once again, I'm not painting everybody with a broad brush, but some of them have told me, I had some classes on genetics back in university, graduate school, maybe the beginning of my med school, but I really didn't have to implement that anywhere. So I don't really know that well. So those are the ones that are open. So it takes some education, but functional medical professionals adopting this, then, specialists in the bigger adoption in the moment from those doctors.
Yeah, that makes sense as well. A doctor, when I'd take my mom to her doctors, and they were all specialized in whatever, they could definitely talk intelligently, and they knew the symptoms, and they knew the steps and where she was at in her illness and all that stuff. Yeah, man, it's just, I don't know how a quicker way or easier way, Because this is not something like the ER is going to be able to use, you know.
No, it's not instantaneous. That's the other thing. Like it takes around 14 business days to get your results. But if you've taken a DNA test from another company, you can upload your raw data and get results immediately. The thing is that it should be a standard practice of care for everyone.
Yeah.
Like there's countries like Iceland, for instance. Every single person in Iceland gets their DNA done, and they store it in a bank. And the reason why is because population, and there may be genetic diseases and conditions that they can get ahead of. I mean, look, we have a patent in machine learning, so you can interrogate the genome. You can ask a question. You can chat with your DNA. You can say, show me all Len's inflammatory markers, cross-reference them with how Len metabolizes. So you can get pretty specific and you can chat with us. You don't have to know genetics per se. It makes it much easier. But what the healthcare professional does may be different from doctor to doctor. I'll give you an example. We have a menopause test for female hormone health, and to show women they have a predisposition of perimenopause or adverse effects of menopause, like like hot flash severity, weight gain, etc. Okay, now that you know this, what do? Well, one doctor can say, well, I recommend hormone optimization. Well, what do? Well, I recommend transdermal patches. Okay, well, that's your area of expertise with estrogen. So you're going to do that because this is what you know. But the thing is, when you come back and you see how well that's working, well, some of it's not working. So what do? Because your area of expertise is transdermal patches, maybe you can say, well, the AI has a suggestion. What about bioidentical hormones? And what about using pellets? That way you put it under the skin. The doctor may have not done this before, but they're willing to try this because their method didn't work. So doctors usually go with what they know, but if the platform can make other suggestions, they can override those suggestions because ultimately it's their platform. But that way you have options. And once again, like for me, it's always about having this relationship with your healthcare professional where it's not, hey, Len, take 2 of these and call me in the morning.
Yeah.
Well, why am I taking 2? Why am I not taking 4? Or why am I not taking 1? Like I'm an ultra rapid metabolizer for certain things, but I'm a normal metabolizer for other things. And I was doing a talk at this physician kind of group, and there was a lot of psychopharmacologists. And I asked them, how many of you do genetic testing before you prescribe? Not one hand went up. Yeah. And I was like, well, that's the issue.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree. I think, to be honest, I think even in the psychology world, the mental health industry, this would be crucial because everything that you're dealing with, you can't see, you know? And I think if you don't know their DNA and their hormone levels and their current health state, you truly are guessing. You're just throwing darts. And I would have found out that probably that the first drug that he put me on was going to tell my body to quit breathing, and I just climbing up into my truck, I had to have to sit there because I was so out of breath. And I discovered, sure enough, that's one of the severe side effects of that drug. So let me ask you this. How did your podcast come from this business as far as like your interest? What brought the podcast on?
Yeah, the podcast called Everything is Personal. I appreciate you mentioning it. It came from actually an interview that I was conducting right before COVID. I was being interviewed by Entrepreneur Magazine, and the guy that was interviewing me, it was like a 20-minute interview, and then we were having lunch. So we ended up talking about music and hip hop and what we're interested in. And he was producing podcasts at the time as his side gig. And then COVID hit, and he called me up and he was like, "Hey, you should do a podcast. I'm like, I don't know. He goes, I'll produce it. I'm like, well, if you come on with me, maybe be my co-host, because I don't know what I'm doing. And he came on for a few episodes, but he's like, I can't, I'm busy. So I'm like, well, you know what? I'm going to continue doing this. And I said, but I need to figure out a purpose. What am I going to do with this podcast? And what I really wanted to do was interview people that I found interesting that had something of an obstacle they had to overcome. So I'm really fascinated about people's personal journeys, why everything is personal, because it helps to leave a breadcrumb trail for other people to follow. Success depends how you define success. It could be people that went into the military that had some challenges there. What would they do to overcome that? I have a good friend of mine. He's an ex SEAL medic from SEAL Team 6, and he was telling me like all these crazy stories. And then he was telling me how during COVID they started losing some of the men. And I had him on my show, and we started talking about this. What can we do? And what was the pivotal point? So now you're communicating what you did and what you did to help some of these other men that you were with. So other people, like you're doing a platform, so other people can hear and see, okay, there's hope. There's something I can do. And that's what I really want to convey to people, to say there is always an opportunity to do something else. It's never too late. You can always teach an old dog new tricks. It's a bunch of bullshit. And people need to feel that they're not out there by themselves on an island. I had too many people that I lost in my life due to overdose, due to taking their own life, because they thought there was no hope. There's no glimmer of hope. So if you feel that and you don't have a community out there, then it gets dark pretty quickly. And if you can shed a little bit of light onto that by saying there's somebody out there that maybe had it, I don't know about worse or better, but had also had a very difficult thing that happened to them, and look how they were able to overcome that. So that's the mission.
Yeah, you said it perfect, man. Every person out there has a story, and you may not think it's an important one, but you never know how your story is going to impact somebody else.
Right.
And that's exactly what this platform is a place, if I find somebody interesting, I reach out and bring them on just to hear their story and learn a little bit about them. And you're not going to get that from mainstream media. You're going to get a cut up. You're getting reels is all you're really getting, and you're not understanding the passion behind their choices. And that's the most important part of the story.
Yeah. Well, mainstream media also has a filter.
Yeah.
I know people that are in the business, and they've been told that they need to slant one way or another. So are you getting some real media and news, or are you getting a little bit of an editorial mix in there? So at the very least here, we're not giving anybody news. We're making it clear. We're having a conversation. We're telling a story. And absolutely there's a slant because it comes from me. I have my own opinion and my own slant. So I'm not talking about delivering information, but it's my interpretation of information as it is yours. And that makes for interesting conversations because people can connect to that. And when you hear a talking head just giving you information, blasting at it, it's really not a conversation. I think people remember conversations, remember stories much better than they remember, just facts spewed at them.
Well, and the fascinating part about this is what we're saying here could change decisions in the future. Imagine what America would have been like if George Washington, Abraham Lincoln had the ability to record podcasts that we could interact with now.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that they wouldn't have had something to say that may have changed a decision sometime between then and now. These are some of the most important people ever. And I think that's one problem that we had when we just recently had everybody tearing down buildings and renaming army bases and everything else, because we didn't have any context behind any of it. Why was Fort Bragg called Fort Bragg? The history behind it. And I hope that podcasting changes that in the future. I was part of the world's longest war, or not world, but America's longest war.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's going to be said about that war 30 years from now in history books. But I can tell you that they'll be able to search the internet and find out my opinions and my views on it. So documenting our stories is important.
Yeah. And I think history itself, rewriting history is never a good idea. Learning from history and knowing where it comes from is the way that we need to be. And, my daughter goes to Berkeley, and I find it fascinating when you talk, brilliant kids, everybody's super smart. But when you talk to them about history, it really, very little knowledge. It all comes from little, clips that they received in social, and they really don't know. So the idea is that there's activism, which is a big part of being in that school and other schools. But the reason why they're doing it is because it's sort of this sheep mentality, right? Well, somebody doing this, so I heard it from so and so, and let's all go. And sort of different than activism used to be. Like, I'm not. I wasn't protesting the Vietnam War or anything like that. But if I look at history and the way it was done, there was real emotion associated with an action, whether it was right or wrong. But it wasn't just a mentality of, I heard something from somebody else. You actually got the information, you made a decision, you took a side. Whether it was right or wrong, it doesn't matter. But I don't think we're doing it this way these days. It's just all about this mentality of belonging and being a part of something without having the context behind it.
Yeah. And I've said this in the last few podcasts. It's evident in the decision-making process that you can tell that America definitely does have a mental health crisis. And that could be from foods that we're consuming. That could be from different medications. It could be from self-medicating on illegal drugs. All three of those could be affecting decision-making processes. And our world of knowledge before decision has became, I'm gonna learn for about 3 minutes, and then I'm gonna make a life-changing decision.
Yeah.
And it's tough. It's hard, even as a podcaster. I'm sure you understand, of keeping the audience listening.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% about this mental health crisis, and I think we as parents, our generation. I'm 53, so I'll say my generation and a little bit older, a little bit younger, we're responsible for that. Like the way that we treated our kids. I'm a latchkey kid. My parents would go to work. I take the bus to school. I bring my books. I grab lunch. I grab my bike. I'm out with my friends. The street light comes on. I got to go home for dinner. Nobody cared. Nobody asked. Like, we did our thing. And now we're hovering over our kids, and we got to be very sensitive to their needs. But you got to have a little bit of toughness. You got to be a thicker skin. One thing that I do understand about bullying, we have plenty of bullying back in the day too, but you just, punch somebody in the nose and they punch you in the nose, and that's it. And you settle and you hug it out, whatever. But the thing that I find different, when we went to school, 3:00, the bell rings, we're out. I mean, there may be a fight after school, but you're home. You don't have to deal with the bullying when you get home. Right. But now with social media, you're dealing with it 24 hours a day. And that can expose kids to, some of those mental health challenges. But I think instead of, putting kids on medication and all these other things that we're doing, maybe there's a different way. Maybe having conversations with our kids and trying to figure out what's going on and giving examples. I think we kind of lost a lot of that because it's easier to give a pill and say, oh, I don't know how many of my daughter's friends growing up were on medication for ADD or ADHD.
Yeah.
I was like, really, is it really necessary? And I'm not saying that it's not for some people, but that mass, amount that we started over prescribing, and how many, kids are on the spectrum, and there's different levels of that. And I understand, but I think that neurodivergence doesn't have to be something that's negative. It can also be used as a superpower as well.
Yeah.
But we've lost that ability to communicate, and we just kind of say it's easier for us to give somebody a screen, give somebody a pill, and you go take care of that. And we don't even know what they're up to with those screens.
Yeah, I think back as a kid, I always lived with parents that both worked. So there was never a time where mom stayed home and took care of the kids and dad. But I do know as a culture, we came from that. It used to be like that there was somebody home that took care of the house and somebody that brought the income in. And for whatever reason now, it's a 2 and 3 job requirement to survive anymore, unless you're specialized in something. But the average person, they couldn't afford to not have their spouse work, and that has taken away the involvement with the kids, and that is something that we would have to change to get the parents back to being involved, to the point where I don't have to hover over you. I know your circles of where you're staying, who you're with. I know their background, and I can make my decisions off that. What talks do I need to have with my kids? Well, I know Johnny over here is smoking cigarettes. So, let me talk about that with my son, about the problems of smoking and so forth, and try to educate him. But you're right. Nowadays, parents don't even know who they're hanging out with.
To me, that's the biggest challenge, because you're sort of your circle of friends, or who you hang out most, is a huge influence on you as a kid. What I've noticed a lot of times, and COVID played a big role in this, having these digital friends, you're wearing your headphones and you're talking to, Johnny, who's supposed to be, in the Netherlands. You don't know what he's an avatar. Johnny could be somebody, a 40-year-old man, or whatever that is. But it's not a real friendship. There's no real connection. There's no real, like, let's go out and hang out and ride bikes together and play, street hockey together. That doesn't exist anymore. And you have these virtual relationships, and people confuse them for real connections, or real relationships. And there's a lot of influence to be had there. And that's where I think the parents don't really know who that circle is, because sometimes that circle isn't the people who you're going to school with. It can be that person who you're playing a video game at night till 3 o'clock in the morning, talking to somebody who's completely in a different country and has a different agenda to manipulate you.
Yeah. And man, you see it all over the place. You can go to YouTube and see it. You can watch video footage of people that, hunt these predators on children, and they'll have somebody biting in minutes.
Yeah.
We're not talking about hours. So it's not like it's a rarity, it won't happen to my children. I bet you it's happening to 5 or 6 out of 10, at least, that are being contacted. I'm not saying they went through the process, but had a conversation with somebody that they thought was somebody else, and you're right. And it's not even like about pictures, because with AI now, there's scams where people are FaceTiming with their parents, and the parents see their kid, and the kid's saying, "Hey, I just got arrested. I need $50 to get bailed out or whatever, but it's not their kid, you know? And so there is going to be a bad side to AI. And I think, you know, I am on the hopes that, you know, we learned our lessons from when the internet was created, and we determined the good things about it and use it in the correct ways. And the ways you're talking is absolutely would be amazing to have it in the workplace of your health provider. I use it every day for my radio station. You know, my DJs are AI DJs.
Yeah.
They're willing to work for free. So,
For now.
yeah, absolutely. So it does have some amazing stuff, and I learned so much. I don't even use Google anymore.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's a big part. You got a lot of years of experience in the industry that you're in. What was your initial thoughts about AI coming into your industry?
I love it. So I'm a kind of a different person that way because I love innovation. I love technology. When the internet was starting, I remember I was in physical therapy school in Temple University, and my dad was like, "If you can figure out this internet thing, this World Wide Web, you know, that's going to be your future." And I started an internet company in 1992. Anything that's innovative and fresh, I'm all over it. The challenge is that you need guardrails. So I look at the thing that we can benefit from, and there's a tremendous amount of benefit, and there's some moral questions. I'll give a couple to your audience and maybe to you as well. So there's ways right now where AI, there's so many mistakes that humans make with imaging, right? They see something on an MRI, they see something on a CT scan, and it looks like that's what it is, and it's a misdiagnosis. Like I had Montel Williams. Everybody will remember the old talk show host. I had him on my show. We did our reciprocal shows together, and I don't know if people know this, but you know he's a veteran. He was a Marine, and he got diagnosed with breast cancer, and he in a VA hospital, and he had a mastectomy. He had his, but he was misdiagnosed. He didn't have breast cancer.
Oh,
And that's how he got into bodybuilding to try to rebuild his chest and all this other stuff. But that's one of the things, human error. He's not mad about it, whatever that's what happened. But if you can use AI will not make that mistake, and it'll compare to millions and millions of other scans and actually get ahead of some of those things. Tremendous power of computation and thoughts. There's also this technology that scientists out of Israel are creating with nanobots that you can actually inject a nanobot, and that'll be your scanning, buddy inside your body. They'll look for signals of something going off or wrong, and send the signal to an app and to your doctor so they can prevent these things from happening with AI as well. Tremendous amount of power. But here's where the moral thing gets in. So there's technology called CRISPR. For those of you who don't know, we can actually go in and edit the genome. So there's the big genome project. But now, if we know that something's wrong in the genome, we can go in and edit that. So there's a guy named Dr. Peter Diamandis. He runs the X Prize. He's on the board of a company called Fountain Life with Tony Robbins and Dr. Robert Harari. And one of the things I saw him speaking of is the investment in CRISPR. So this technology will allow you to go in and gene edit. So he was saying they can cure right now, as of today, these like sickle cell, Down syndrome, a lot of these genetic diseases that we know are in embryonic state. We can go in and edit and gene edit them. The moral dilemma is, well, where does that stop? Can we create the perfect human then? Can we make a race of blonde hair, blue eye, 6'3" men and women like somebody else was trying to make? So that's where the guardrails come in. I'm not the guy to do it, but I can give some suggestions. We all know where it can go from there if we don't put guardrails on there.
yeah. I mean, absolutely. you know, why you just really hit it on the spot. I mean, that type of stuff was exactly why the laws for child pornography and everything got changed, was because people were making videos with fake children, and then when they were getting caught saying, well, that's not a child, that's a fake, that's art or whatever, right? And so they had to change it to where, it wasn't just physical, it could be done visually, it could be suggested, however, and they could still charge you. And so I could see, if we could make the perfect person, well, then you got the porn industry that can make the perfect girls and guys and skits. You got the perfect drug dealer. I don't care if you take my guy to jail, I'll make a new one. So yeah, it's just how far do you want to go and how sci-fi do you want to be? But I agree 100%. We can put laws. I mean, we got the best government in the world to create red tape. They're masters at it. So we can create and control things like, you can't clone a person, but can you clone an arm?
China's doing it. China right now is cloning above and beyond where, the United States has laws against it. Do you need to clone an arm, or can you 3D print an arm from genetic material that comes directly from you? So if you're able, and this is the next level of technology, we're getting so advanced at this point that we can regrow and grow our own organs. Like, the biggest challenge with organ donors and everything else is rejection. Yeah. But what if it's your own organ? All you're doing is taking your genetic material, your stem cells, and you're creating and you're putting into a scaffolding, and it can be different types of scaffolding, and you just 3D print your kidney, and you don't need, to wait for somebody to give up their kidney. And that's the future, and that's the positive aspects of medicine, technology, and AI. But as you said, if you're going to clone, if you're going to create that, and you're able to, can you actually, take it to the next level? And yeah, you can, and I'm sure some people will. But what we can only create laws. We can't create global laws. We can only create laws, as you said, with plenty of red tape in this country. But who's doing what in China and in Russia and some of these other parts, we have no oversight over.
Yeah, I mean, think about how big your army could be if you could just reproduce a human being, and I'm sure that is part of, the thought process from some of these other countries. Because it is. Look at Russia right now. Do you not think that they would like to have a factory where they could make a bunch more soldiers? They've lost tons. Ukraine has too. And I think that type of stuff, yeah, I don't know how you would control it worldwide. We didn't do a good job with nuclear weapons, I can tell you that much. So, something like this, that can be done at a very small scale, in a laboratory, man, it would be hard to
trace. Coming. Robot armies are coming. It's already done. I've seen it. You can go online and see it. There's symbiotic suits like you can wear as a soldier. You can wear a robot suit, so you're actually enhanced like one of those superheroes. Yeah. But they also have robots. All they need to do is scale that, and absolutely what you. It's how do you control that? That's the challenge, right? So not to get it, because we all watch Terminator, we know where it can go. So you got to be really, really aware. Movies are predictors sometimes of what can happen. So just be aware.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to know what's happening next year, watch The Simpsons.
There you go. Exactly.
They will tell you. I mean, everybody laughed when Trump was going to be president. on that Simpsons episode, and then now look where we're at. You know, so I do like this aspect, and I think, when you talk risk to reward, by not implementing it, you're worse off than what you would be if you implemented it and had to deal with the outliers, because there's going to be an outlier in everything you do. It doesn't matter. Somebody's going to find that loophole to make a buck or whatever. So I think we would hurting ourselves even worse if we didn't follow suit and do those same things. It's just it's just, like you said, how far do you want to go? Do we make these people to think like us and act like us? And next thing you know, I'm not going to work no more. The other Don is, and yeah, man, that type of stuff, it gets deep, but it is truly amazing of what we can do. So
it's happening right now, and you brought up the nuclear race. So we didn't do a good job, but it's the arms race that I think helped to lead to, the Iron Curtain falling down, because if we're not going to do it, they will do it, or somebody will do it that's on the opposite side. So at the very least, we need to match. And then at some point, we can say all of us disarm, because, sometimes you need a little bit of strength. You need to show strength to be able to negotiate. And if it's only one-sided, you don't have any leverage.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And yeah, I'm sure, because that industry is innovating hourly. It's the first one to come up with the better gun, the better. The military just changed their M4s. They're now using a SIG weapon, and man, it's badass. I want one, but
because it's the best. SIG is the best.
I agree. I'm a SIG guy myself, and I priced it. The civilian version of the new weapon is $9,000.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that type of stuff is important. Another reason why, even with cryptocurrency, I wasn't that guy that said, "Oh, it's fake, it's bogus." I was a guy wanting to learn about it and understand it, and it's because I do like technology. You can learn a lot from a failed product, and those are important aspects. So I want to step back just 1 second. I know we're getting close to the top of the hour, but so my daughter, right? And I never even thought about this as a parent. She got skin cancer that was up in her hairline, and nobody knew it. We never shaved our daughter's head, and it got all the way to the point where she was just sick, and she kept going to the doctors, but she's only 20. Well, she's 26 now, and this has been going on for a couple of years. So say 24 years old, nobody went straight to, "Oh man, we need to do a scan and see if you got cancer." Well, finally, after months, they did, and they realized that she was in stage 4, and they found it in other places starting to form on her face, and had to do some plastic surgery. And then 6-month checkup, everything's good, right? 1 year, it's in her liver, and it just started spreading. But as a parent, these are things that I could be more alert to if I knew what markers my kids had.
Absolutely.
And so I do think it's extremely important, and will save a lot of lives,
We hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, brother, I'm going to bring you forward and give you the opportunity to tell everybody about your podcast and where they can find you and all that good stuff.
I appreciate it. You can find me at EndoDNA.com. That's the company. On social, I'm Len May. Instagram is Len May DNA, but everywhere else just Len May. I have a book It's called Making Cannabis Personal. I'll hold it up here. You can get it on Amazon, wherever you get books. And my podcast is called Everything is Personal. And you can get it wherever you get podcasts, YouTube or Apple, Spotify, anywhere else.
All right, man. And, by the way, I love your shirt, because I was a Beastie Boys fan
Thank you.
as well. I had to fight for my right to party,
There you go. They're the best.
Well, if you don't mind holding on for a second, we'll throw the old exit video out. I appreciate all of you guys for listening, and I hope you enjoyed and learned, and maybe even change your thoughts on how the future and the current state of the medical care is.